Tyler, the creator, has given us two more snippets to work with. At least for me, it's two more snippets just because first one, A Boy with a Gun, released a day ago, and then this one came out a few hours before I started recording. And now that I started recording, I'm just gonna put them together like a nice little peanut butter jelly sandwich. You got your peanut butter, A Boy's a Gun, and then you got your jelly, a magic wand, and you're just gonna put them together. What did I take from these snippets? Well, I think that A Boy with a Gun has adjusted my idea on what this narrative could be about, and A Magic Wand reinforced that. So, A Boy with a Gun is the first snippet that I'm going to talk about, which basically the visual is what helped kind of assist me in shifting my idea on what this could be about. In it, Tyler is climbing a ladder through a thunderstorm in what I think is New York City, but I don't think the city or the location matter too much. It's the idea of that ladder. In it, the lyrics are basically, you so motherfucking dangerous, you so motherfucking dangerous, yeah, you choking me. As he's saying this, he's climbing this ladder, and we don't see him until he gets to that top. And what I think this represents is not only the idea of like how work is, like when you make something, typically no one really gets to see the process unless you do a documentary or behind the scenes. Even artists have their own version of this where we get to see like a sped up version of maybe what they did, and sometimes they'll give detailed explanations, but most of the time when music gets released, we don't really see the back end of it. What that encompasses is that we're most likely not going to see the work it takes to get to that top. Alongside of that, what I think it really does mean is Tyler is kind of wrestling with the anxiety of trying to best what he had previously. And what I mean by that is that Flower Boy was incredibly well received all around. A lot of people loved it. Some people at first thought it might be a troll because of the nature of the lyrics that were exploring his sexuality, which at first people were like, okay, he's just trolling, he's not serious, because he used to troll a lot. And so people unfortunately tried to do the whole boy who cried wolf thing with him, but that turned out to be false. So thankfully people were able to go, okay, he's not messing with us, he's serious. And basically in Flower Boy he was exploring his sexuality and his other fears and his loneliness that seemed to really be bothering him. Fast forward 2019, it seems like people really love that album so much that and I'm sure others have wondered what was the next area that he was going to explore, what's that next thing he's going to explore. And I think this will hint at it, or at least it did, in the fact that basically he's talking about trying to best himself and one up himself and bring the next great thing. And I think there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, just because it's kind of hard once you've gotten past the angsty teenage years, then into adulthood, where you have like two really successful albums and people are kind of like, what are you gonna do next? And he himself seems to be wondering this. That's why when he gets to the ladder, he kind of falls off, and it's this fear of like, oh my god, am I gonna do better than I did last time, or am I like too high up that I'm just bound to fall down at this point? And sort of everyone, I think, has that to a degree, where you start like being successful, you start winning at something, and then you're like, okay, hold on a second, things are going too well. Now I'm sure there are other people who can be successful and not worry about that, but I know that for me and others, it's this constant wondering like, okay, I'm doing way too well at this thing, like this is getting too, like, where's the balance, where's the karma, where is the thing that's gonna bring me back down? And creatively, that's also really difficult, just because you make something really cool and you're like, okay, how do I do that again? How do I, do that again? Especially when he was exploring something so personal. Where does he go from here? And I think he's trying to figure that out. And I think Igor, the servitude is the narrative, not necessarily the idea of like him rapping about serving others. Igor narratively exists as a potential outlet for that idea of like trying to get to the heart of these ideas that he has and these hopes and these anxieties that he has about continuing that success and not necessarily getting stagnant. And falling into stagnancy is very tricky, especially when you drop something so successful. People put a lot of pressure on the next thing, like it's got to be better than Flower Boy, it's gotta be better than Cherry Bomb, it's gotta be better than thing he made before. Like, everyone kind of puts that on them, and I think that's just because of how our expectations have grown to function, is that we want the next best thing. And I think we've always wanted the next best thing, but in 2019, at least from what I've been able to understand, it's really difficult to measure that, especially because everyone's constantly asking for the next best thing. So you're constantly having to one up yourself and also remain in the public conscious, unless you're super successful like Tyler is, because a lot of people are hyped about this. It's not like he's disappeared for like way too long and been gone for like 10 years or something, and then people are like, okay, we don't care anymore. But there is that underlying pressure to kind of always be around, and I think that's something that artists notice and agree exists. At least I'm sure they acknowledge it to an extent. Being a creative and having to deal with that kind of pressure of one-upping yourself, when creativity is something that isn't linear, it's not always around. You're gonna have burnout in some aspect, and he hasn't really dropped too much in the last 2 years, other than, like I said, what I listed chronologically. As far as that's all that I know that he's dropped, and that's not something I think that really was, other than like releasing his own instrumentals and dropping some new ones and doing Potato Salad A$AP Rocky and then his Christmas EP. Beyond that, I don't think he's like I mean, sure, he's probably been working in the studio and stuff, so I shouldn't get lost in that, but again, yeah, I think that A Boy with a Gun is kind of him struggling with that anxiety and trying to figure out how to go farther than that. That's why he kind of says how dangerous it is. The success is dangerous only because it is people's expectations that follow that success that lead you to being on top and wondering like, how do you keep from falling off that ladder? And there's like a thunderstorm at the top, like that's probably fear, and then him just falling off kind of like, well, let's see where I go. And that's what I think A Boy with a Gun is. That dangerous. The gun is more, I'm not sure, I guess maybe potentially the title can refer to basically people's expectations are the gun that the boy is holding, only because as a youth, that's when our ideas are at their most, just like they don't get diluted in any manner. We're just letting our imagination run loose. And as we get older, our imagination, it doesn't become more sterile, but it does get adjusted because we're suddenly like focusing on this like idea, like, and wondering like how it can actually be worked out. With that, we're gonna go over to Your Magic Wand, which is a lot longer. And basically in that, we have Tyler kind of talking about he's asking this thing or person to stay, and that they've finally been able to achieve this love, this relationship, this thing that they've been able to achieve. And sort of this is him, I guess, talking to his success maybe, and trying to get to a point where the success is consistent and not sporadic. And I think he's garnered such a huge following that it could be about something else, and most likely it's just literally about a relationship, and I'm just doing the thing where you reach. Stop reaching me. It's not that deep. Get your hand out of the pool. Okay, I think that it's most likely around that kind of same idea, and this is like reinforcing it because he's on a stage and he's like asking this thing to stay, and these people like are loving it, but then he like runs away in the desert. Once again, it's kind of that idea of self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, like being so afraid that something does end up happening, afraid of failure that it ends up happening. But then again, I don't think Tyler's gonna fail, and I think that he has a lot of confidence in himself, and I think that if this is what I think it is, then he's just kind of navigating this and characteristically allowing it to live through this music. And both snippets sound really good. A Boy with a Gun has a really sweet sound to it, while the formula on A Magic Wand kind of basically has this very same aggressive sentiment that the last snippet before these two had, and I cannot remember, I think it's Yeah Boy, but basically the same sentiment is here, where it's kind of aggressive at first and the beat feels like it's like real hot, but it also has this very sweet background tinge that takes over towards the end. All it really does is make me excited for this album that is coming out in 3 days, if I'm not late with this. But yeah, I like both of these snippets. They are building a lot of intrigue, and I cannot wait for Igor the album. Like I said, I think this narrative is much more than just simply kind of going into these horror themes, but instead exploring the anxiety and the idea of servitude towards a community that has help build you in a way, and how Tyler fights with that, and also the anxiety of being better than the next thing that he had and constantly one-upping himself, which we're all trying to do in a way. We're all trying to constantly improve, and it's something that's not exactly easy. So hats off to Tyler, regardless of what he's actually doing, what he actually means by the song, and I can't wait for the album, which is Igor, Tyler, the Creator, a boy with a gun, and a magic wand. Dual wielding? Can you dual wield those things? Well, this guy says a dual wielding wizard. Fudge. Just I don't want to imagine that, because I just hear Wingardium Leviosa, and you're just like no. It's just utter destruction. But we should definitely advocate for stricter gun laws. Wizards or not. Stay safe, people.